I would like to write music that is a signal of my love for humanity and for my audiences. So I try to write music that uplifts and educates, but also soothes people and makes them feel loved and makes them feel that the world is in fact going to be a better place than it sometimes seems. The way I try to describe my music, my shorthand for it is it's an act of love, an act of honor and respect and love for my audiences. I mean, I would just like to think that my music points a way forward for people, that I can bridge the gap between a more distant past and a future that speaks to generations to come.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to Season 6 of the Piano Pod, our season of creativity and connection. I'm so excited about today's episode because my guest brings both of those ideas to life in such a powerful way. Composer Stefania de Kenessey has written music for just about every stage you can imagine, from Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center to international festivals. And she's also been a champion for women in music throughout her career. But at the heart of our conversation is her latest and, in many ways, her most personal project, Microvids. What started as 19 tiny piano pieces during the pandemic has since grown into something so much bigger. A whole world of music, poetry, improvisation, orchestral color, even visuals. It's a project full of love, resilience, and collaboration, and it shows how something small can open up into something truly expansive. In our talk, Stefania shares the story of Microvids, what it taught her about writing in miniature, how collaboration shaped the project, and why supporting women composers has always been at the core of her work. Before we jump in, I just want to thank you for listening. Every time you like, rate, subscribe, or share an episode, you help this show keep going. And I am so grateful. So here it is, Season 6, Episode 3 of the Piano Pod, The World of Microvids, from miniature piano pieces to a boundless work of music, poetry, collaboration, and love. Please enjoy the show.
You are listening to the Piano Pod, where we talk to the brightest minds in the industry about how they are bringing the piano into the future and thriving in a complex, ever-evolving world. Stefania, welcome to the Piano Pod, and thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really and truly honored. And as I was saying, I'm doubly honored because although I play piano, I'm not really a pianist. I'm a composer. So it's really a thrill for me to be here and to talk to you.
And you compose wonderful piano pieces that I can't wait to talk about. That's the reason you're here. But we first met last spring through our mutual friend, the amazing, incredible Donna Weng Friedman, who is, not only a powerhouse in the music world, but also, you guys collaborated together with this, the album that we're about to talk about. But also she was the past guest on season 2. And then Donna and I were getting ready to perform this four hands piece at this event called the History of Movie Music event, presented by Arts Rock in Nyack, New York, which is like an hour and a half away from New York City. And then somehow you turned the page for us, and and then to get there, the organizer sent us a driver, and then he mentioned that he also needed to pick up the main guest of the evening, and none other than the legendary conductor Leonard Slatkin. And so we were together, squeezed into this van, like 5-6 of us.
Right.
Yeah,
that was a lot of fun. Yeah. One of the great things about Donna Weng Friedman is that she's not only a great pianist, but she has great friends and she does all sorts of really fun activities. So if anytime Donna says, "Hey, I'm thinking of doing X, want to come along?" My response is invariably, "If I'm in town, I'm coming along." Sure.
yes,
I get to meet fun people like you, for instance,
Yeah.
And none of it is according to a grand plan, but these things happen and they're always really happy events in my life. So I'm always grateful to her for making these random connections that turn out to be absolutely joyous.
Yes, and absolutely memorable,
Right,
So,
both, yes.
yes, yes. So, anyway, then I remember sitting with you in the back and talking about your work and then your upcoming project and feeling immediately inspired by your vision and project. So, I knew right away that I had to invite you to the Piano Pod, and so I'm really especially grateful that we're having this conversation today. And
Oh, thank
finally,
you.
yeah.
Great.
So, to begin, let me start with my signature opener. If you had to describe your mission or passion in just a few sentences, how would you put it?
I would like to write music that is a signal of my love for humanity and for my audiences. So I try to write music that uplifts and educates, but also soothes people and makes them feel loved and makes them feel that the world is in fact going to be a better place than it sometimes seems. So literally the way I try to describe my music, my shorthand for it is it's an act of love. So I try to write beautiful melodies, beautiful rhythms, things that people can remember. So my music tends to be a lot more tonal, a lot more audience friendly than most contemporary music as a result, or I think it is, or I try to be. But for me, it really is an act of honor and respect and love for my audiences. That's the best way I can write it. And I mean, the best way I can describe it. And of course, I have music playing in my head all the time. It's a disease, an obsession, a gift. It's whatever you want to call it. But to get that out there and to make it as loving an act as possible would be the way I would describe it.
Oh, beautifully said. And it's really that what you just said coming through your music. So let's talk about this Microvids you composed. So I've actually have had the pleasure of visiting your beautiful home already twice. And then, in fact, a couple of weeks ago, you opened up your beautiful home and for your album release party, and I was invited, and I was struck by how much this new project reflects your artistic vision, and that brings me to what I've love for us to focus on and dive into today. We're going to really talk about focus on microvids, and it's such a fascinating concept because it feels both intimate and expansive at the same time. So for our listeners who may be new to it, what is this new album, Microvids?
So Microvids, the album is 3 versions of Microvids, and the genesis of Microvids actually goes back quite a ways to the pandemic, when I was locked up in the apartment that you kindly visited for many months and feeling kind of depressed about my future, because I thought, I'm a classical musician. I write almost exclusively concert music. Concerts are not going to be happening. It's the end of my life. I was really quite depressed for a while, and then I started to come out of it, and I thought of all the people, especially younger players, who are sitting at home locked up also. And I thought, wouldn't it be lovely to write them something that they could practice, that they could enjoy practicing and just have fun with? And I thought back on my own childhood, and I grew up on Bartók's Microcosmos. And I always love those, but they're fairly naughty pieces. They're not that easy to digest. And, I went to a music school and I come from a Hungarian background. So for me, it was relatively easygoing. But I'm not sure they're that easy for young American audiences or pianists. So I thought, well, what if I did something like that with a more contemporary, more American, more loving flair, if that's the right way to put it. So I wrote 19 miniatures, 19 short pieces that connect to one another, but can also be played separately, that do form an arc from beginning to end, but also are a book from which you can extract exercises that go from relatively simple to relatively complex. So it mirrors the Bartók Microcosmos in that sense. Except they're more tuneful, frankly, and more American-ish, if that's the right adjective for it. And I just had a beautiful time writing them, and I felt my spirit soar, and I felt like I was giving something to the world again. And that felt very, very satisfying. So that was the initial impetus behind Microvids. The other thing that made it very satisfying for me, which is purely selfish and purely personal, is that with each piece I now write, now that I'm in my dotage, I've promised myself that I would do at least one thing that I've never done before. just one thing, even if it's relatively small, and even if only I know that I've never done it before, but something that expands my horizon and my repertoire. And I've never written miniatures before, ever. I tend to write large scale forms, and for me, a short piece is, say, 4 to 6 minutes. A regular movement can be 8 to 10 to 12, and then there's several movements, blah, 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 that whole, methodology. And so this was the first time I wrote miniatures, and that was kind of a challenge, but enormous fun also. So that's the personal part of it. When I finished these 19 miniatures in honor of COVID-19, I gave them to Donna Weng Friedman. I didn't know what to do with them. I'm a typical composer. You get the music, you write it, you copy it over, you give it to a performer, and then you let go and you move on. But Donna said that these were the most fantastic things she had ever, heard. And she said she would love to play them, and would I give her rights to play them. And when I went over to her apartment to hear the first rehearsal, after our masks were off and it was safe to do so, she said, can you just sit down and don't interrupt me? I'm taking all sorts of liberties with what's actually on the written page. I don't know if you're going to like it or hate it, but can I just play them for you? And so I sat down and she started to play, and they were such an incredible performance of these 19 miniatures that I started to cry. It was that good. It was that brilliant, insightful, sensitive a performance. So from that moment on, Donna and I bonded musically over these 19 miniatures. And she just kind of took the ball and ran with it. And she's been kind of spearheading what I would call the Microvids movement, the expansion of Microvids, the second and third and fourth life of Microvids, and eventually this recording of Microvids. So to finish that story, she said, these are brilliant. I'm going to give them to students and we'll get them out there. But I think they need titles, because I just gave them numbers because I'm just a composer. So I thought, okay, what are some titles that would work? And then she said, and they need short poems that enable people to focus in on the individual crystalline sentiment or emotion of each short miniature. And I thought, okay, I can ask some of my poet friends to do something, but why don't I try my hand at it, since I have some sense of what emotion each miniature kind of dives deeply but briefly into. So I wrote 19 couplets and gave them to Donna, and she said, these are brilliant. That's it. We're done. So now Microvids exists as 19 short poems that precede 19 short piano miniatures.
Right. And these poems are spoken, not sung. Right?
Yes, absolutely. No, they're spoken. And on the recording, we were blessed to get the recitation or narration by Krystal Joy Brown, who's a Broadway star in her own right, and she contributed her talents to it, and she reads them absolutely brilliantly. So, it's a very different kind of approach to music, but it works, I think brilliantly.
Pure joy. Rippling reflections, sunlight dappled white. Pure joy, sweetly pleasured, heaven's blue delight.
Then that evolved to?
Well, so that was the beginning. And then Donna called me up and said, I have another idea. Microvids could be expanded to have another instrument. And so we did, I first added a flute part. Later, I added a violin part. There are actually several duo versions of Microvids. And again, the thing that made this very unusual was both it exploited the potential richness of the musical material, right? So because they're miniatures and so much is so densely packed emotionally into each little piece, you can pull out some of that emotion and, do it fruitfully in a way that you might not if the piece started out as a big piece for orchestra, for instance, right? Then you wouldn't want to double the orchestra or add a bassoon solo or whatever, right? So it works with these miniatures. The other part that made it, again, for me personally interesting is Donna said, and I agreed, that the piano part should remain as it is. So when I add new instruments to Microvids, as I have done, I'm not orchestrating them. Orchestrating typically means you take the existing musical material and you divide it among new instruments. So, for instance, you could give the melody to the oboe and the flute, and you could give the bass line to the cellos and the double, et cetera, et cetera. You can, sort of finish that sentence. But that's not what I do in the versions of Microvids that are piano plus an instrument. I actually create, imagine, and weave a new sonority, a new part around the existing piano music. And that's completely different an approach from normal orchestration or normal transformations of piano music. So that was enormous fun because, again, it made me think, what is the essential emotional undertone of, say, this microvid? And in the case of the fourth microvid, which is very, very airy, it was to have, in this case, the violin, but some instrument in the absolute stratosphere, just floating above it, like a breath or a breath of fresh air.
Because the title is Reach for the Sky.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right. It just made sense, and it makes sense, and it works like magic. So that was the second iteration of it for piano with a solo instrument. And this is not going in chronological order, but the next sort of logical part of it was we heard the incredible violinist Curtis Stewart perform. And he both performs existing repertoire and does improvisational material and connects with audiences. And we looked at one another and we said, we've got to work with Curtis. And Donna's idea was both to have Curtis record my violin part as part of, a duo version of Microvids, but also to ask him to improvise on top of those violin parts or from those violin parts or on top of the piano, whichever way you wish to think of it. So he created, together with Donna, a version of Microvids, which is for piano with Donna playing, and violin improvisation, which Curtis Stewart is doing. And that, again, is very different for my compositional practice. So I'm going to keep going back to how these are things I've never done before, because I've always been a control freak. And I've always been brought up in sort of the Germanic tradition of music, where you control all the parameters of your composition. You tell all the instrumentalists what to do, when, and how to do it, et cetera, et cetera. And here Curtis was just improvising away, and his improvisations are rooted in loosely in American blues, jazz, some country, all sorts of influences, but very, very American leaning, if I can put it that way, and very improvisational, and totally brilliant because his technique is as good as anybody's technique in sort of Western European violinistic Paganini-like terms. So again, it's a really, really interesting combination of things. And that is actually the opening album on our, opening disc on our current album, these improvisations that Curtis does on top of the piano part that Donna is playing. The third version, because this never ends, the third version of Microvids, which is represented on the album that is being published or was just released, came at the behest of the New Jersey Youth Symphony and its music director, Helen Cha-Pyo. And again, it was through the intervention or through a connection created by Donna Weng Friedman. She thought that it would be really, really interesting, since I originally wrote these pieces for young players, to have an orchestra of young players accompanying the piano part, which again made perfect sense. So I created, an orchestral part which is woven around the piano music. So the piano part remains in all these iterations virtually identical. In one or two of the movements, there's a bar at the beginning where she's not playing, and there's a trumpet solo that comes in, or at the very end there may be an extension of one bar, but otherwise the piano part is 99.99% the same in all these versions.
Oh, good to know. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's always the same, but there's an entire orchestral part around it, and it sounds like a completely different piece of music. It
Mm-hmm.
really does, because the emotions and the orchestration and the whole vibe of the piece is radically different. It's not that it's not recognizably the same, but it's different enough so it's not immediately apparent that you're dealing with the exact same basic material. There's so much new that's woven around it. And so, that's the third important version of it. That's the third disc on our current album. And in part because I'm not born in this country, and in part because I think it's important always to have an international outlook. I thought it would be important not just to have the poetry recited in English, as it is on the second track of the album, although Krystal Joy Brown does an absolutely brilliant job of it. So we figured out a way to get a translation into Spanish from a young poet whom I haven't actually met, but was highly recommended to me, Eloisa Amezcua, who's American but of Spanish descent and bilingual. And she created these beautiful translations of the couplets, which are then recited by an actress who also does an amazing job. And we found through Krystal Joy Brown, her recommendation. Her name is Lola López Guardone, and she recites the poetry in Spanish. So that opens up a whole new world of listeners to whom we are reaching out.
Alcanzo el cielo. Soñador, grácil, alto, diáfano. Agarro una nube, alcanzo el cielo.
And I think it's important to, we always say that music is a worldwide language and it is meant to be universal. And I think we kind of mean it, but we don't, as with all good intentions, it's not always 100% realized in reality. So I think it's very, very important that we have on this album both English and Spanish, which are major languages in the world still represented. The ideal is for, at some point, if Microvids keeps going, I have no idea whether it will or where it can go. But my wish would be that it would be translated into multiple languages. And if there are performances, elsewhere, that those performances, the recitation or the narration of the poems take place in the languages that are pertinent to that country. Some of that seems to be happening. There's going to be a performance of Microvids with Donna at the piano by the Virago Symphony Orchestra, which is an all-female orchestra based in Antwerp, Belgium. And the poetry recitation will be done by Esohe Waden. I think I'm pronouncing her last name correctly, but I'm not 100% sure, who is the poet laureate of the city of Antwerp. And she's going to be reciting them probably in Dutch. This is still being discussed, but I would love for that to happen. And the other sort of international aspect of this, which is again not 100% realized yet, but is one of my goals. I attended the United Nations International School when I came to this country, and I went back to them, and I asked students there if they would be interested in taking a couplet or two and translating them into their own native language, and then reciting them and being video and audio recorded with those, in those languages. And they did. So
I saw the video.
Yes, it's wonderful. And the ages range from, I'm going to say 8 to 18, although, I could be, maybe it's 9 to 17, but something along those lines, and the languages range from, your standard European languages, which are, French and Spanish, and to Tamil and Hindu and, other Asian languages. So I'm very, very happy with that as an indication of the kind of direction in which I would love for this piece to eventually go, because it should be universal. Grief and joy are universal emotions. And to the extent that language expresses those languages should be used that speak to listeners in their own context.
Wow, it's a lot to uncover here. But the title is start with micro.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I was listening, every piece is like some of them are 30 seconds. Some
Yes.
of them max maybe a minute and 10 seconds, somewhere around that realm.
Correct.
So they are really tiny little pieces. But what's the challenge? What was the challenge of composing them? You mentioned you are so used to composing massive pieces, whether that is dance. You've written operas too, and so many others. Then here comes this Microvids. So what's the challenge?
Well, the challenge is to find something that is pertinent to say, that is really meaningful, but doesn't require more than a sentence to say, right? So it's the equivalent. You have to have some idea. You can't just keep talking and cover your tracks and wait till you get a good idea. So the same thing with these miniatures. You can't have, say, a beautiful intro that then leads to, eventually your beautiful melody or your beautiful idea. You've really got to think about what is it that you want to say, what is that emotion, and what is its musical equivalent, and make it as compact as possible. And to some extent, to not be afraid of just focusing on that. Part of our Western musical tradition, or certainly my training, is to always be as complex and sophisticated as possible. And that's a very laudable goal in many ways. But it also means that you're already and almost always piling things upon things. So, you're doing harmony and counterpoint and orchestration, and you're thinking of all these things all the time. And that's certainly not, in fact, it's very, very wonderful. But you also have to be content in 30 seconds to just do one thing, so it's a little bit like being asked to create 19 appetizers. I'm not doing 19 main courses. So I'm not doing, the pasta and the sauce and the salad, right? I just have to make the sauce, or I just have to make the tomato salad. I don't know. These are terrible metaphors, but concision, really focusing in on a particular flavor and a particular thought and a particular emotion, and not being afraid to just do that. And it has a kind of intensity to it that is also a little bit scary, because there's no deflection. You really have to delve into that emotion. But it's also wonderful if you can sort of manage to pull it off.
Yeah, they're more like I was thinking of haikus.
Yes, that's a good metaphor. Yes, haikus. Yeah, that's much better than my cooking metaphor. Thank you.
No. But really, like, comes in bite size and just to the point.
To the point, but with a kind of depth that allows and asks for revisiting, right? Because you don't want it to be so shallow that people don't want to come, right? So the same with haikus. You get them the first time, but not 100%. So you reread them, right? You read them again and again, and each time you find something slightly different, slightly deeper in its meaning, in spite of its brevity. And that's not that easy to do, but it's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. So you have the gift of poetry, like writing.
Well, I'm yeah.
Yeah, they are great.
In this case, I had the gift of poetry, and I think it was really, I don't think I'm much of a poet, frankly, but I think in this case, I was so inspired by the idea of these 19 miniatures and the occasion and the purpose, that it just all kind of fell into place simultaneously. I'm not sure if you asked me to sit down now and come up with a great poem in the next 24 hours that I could really do it. So I would like to excuse myself from being considered a poet, but I think in this case they actually do work, and I'm very happy with the little couplets that I wrote for each miniature. I think they balance the music well, and they illuminate the emotional character of the music.
And that each version is so different, as you mentioned, sounds so different, although underneath you can hear the same melody. But yeah, that's amazing, quite amazing. You thought of, while you were writing the actual piano piece, you were thinking of, oh, short pieces. But then did you imagine that short pieces become such a big, expansive thing?
Well, I knew that I was going to, or I imagined from the first that I would write a book of them. So 19. So in some sense, I did know that I was aiming for, um, like I said, like a collection of them. What I didn't realize is that they would sort of grow one after the other. I didn't write them 100% in sequence, but more or less in sequence. So what I didn't count on was that they would develop a kind of narrative arc of their own. So even though they're technically independent, and like I said, they can be extracted and played separately and all of those things, there is a kind of growth to them from start to finish. And that makes them miniatures in one sense, but not miniatures or not just miniatures, right? So there's a macro element to it too, in spite of the micro title.
Right, right. Yeah, makes sense. And so now I want to talk about this violin and piano version particularly. It's very fascinating that violinist Curtis Stewart, he is improvising, and so, but for example, if I want to work with a violinist and then I want to play the piano part, purchasing a score, how would that work? Is there instruction on how the violinist would improvise, or?
So that's a brilliant question, and a question to which I don't have an answer. In part because I've never done this. So, so it's an absolute first for me. And like I said, the album was just released, so all of this is very fresh stuff to me.
Right.
But the second answer to that is I do have a version with my written violin part. So that can be used as a guidance. So as I'm thinking through it, and I'm just thinking out loud, is that I would send that part and then say, use this as a template or as a springboard for the kinds of things that you might want to do as a violin improviser. And I don't know if that would work, in all honesty, but that's kind of the way we did it, and it worked brilliantly. Now, Curtis is a brilliant musician and a brilliant improviser, so I don't know if this method would work for everyone. I really don't. That's why I said I'm not sure I have an answer for your question. It's a brilliant question, and I'll try and think about it. And maybe I should write some verbal instructions, but I don't know. Like I said, I try to expand my compositional practice with each piece. And part of the fun part of that and part of the scary part of that is I don't always know 100% what I'm doing. Right? So I've never done improv involving pieces of my own before. So I'm going to have to figure it out, and I haven't 100% yet figured it out, in part because Curtis made it so easy. He just did such a brilliant job that I could just sigh relief and it's done. He did nothing wrong. He kind of elevated the piece and took it into realms that made perfect sense emotionally and musically. So he kind of saved me the trouble of having to think about how do I get other people to improvise on top of it. So that's why I don't quite have an answer for you yet.
Okay. Well, I can't wait to see where the piano violin version would evolve and being
I don't know.
Accessible. Yeah, who knows? Now, I love all the titles: Out of Place, Skipping Stones, Like a Rock, or Just Joking, Dream Away. It's so modern and relatable, almost like flipping through a photograph. Like every photograph has a specific place and memory. That sort of idea. It's different from taking pictures on your smartphone and flipping through. It's a little different. It's like a photograph, like a good old photograph.
Well, I'm old enough to remember photographs.
So. Yeah, same. So, every single one has this, everybody is posing certain way. It's not this one of those random photos, but there's like a specific meaning to it. It just gave me that vibe. I don't know if I am right or wrong with my impression, but
it's a brilliant simile or a brilliant description. Really is. No, that's very
And then,
insightful. You really got them. I mean, I
yeah,
hadn't thought of that, but you're absolutely on target. Yeah, that's a
yeah, the
wonderful way.
moment you hold a photo and then just brings
Yeah.
you a lot of feeling. Oh, I remember her, or I remember the place, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. Um, so I hadn't thought of the photograph as as a simile or a metaphor for it. But Donna Weng, who's kind of talented and keeps astounding me with her range of talents, has taken a few of these miniatures and added videos to them, added visuals to them. The most recent one is she actually is just released on YouTube. It's called A Silent Cry, and it takes one of the miniatures from Microvids and creates a little music video out of it. No text, no speaking, just the music and visuals. And the visuals or the video is about habitat loss and ecological sort of disaster as it relates to the Himalayan snow leopard. And it's a beautiful short little piece. Very, very moving, and she's entered it in, I think, 15 or so festivals, film festivals that honor short, music videos, and gotten 15 awards already. So it's so that that idea of there being a visual component to these microvids is also something that we are exploring, or that Donna has started to explore, and as usual, has started to explore it brilliantly. So that's the sense in which Microvids keeps having more and more life to it. Um, and actually, my kids, both a couple of days ago, said, why don't you have videos of each of the 19 miniatures, that could be, because it's a visual culture. And these pieces are so colorful as it is. They're so dense with emotion and dense with musical color. I don't even know what words to use. That it could actually work itself, into a visual medium. And so, I was talking to Donna, and she kind of agrees. So we're thinking about maybe if I can find funding or something to create 19 videos of these 19 microvids. So it may have a life over and beyond music. So it's going to be music and poetry and visuals and videos, and I don't know what else, but I'm having the time of my life with them, because I thought I was just creating these tiny little nothings, 19 30-second pieces of music in 1 minute. I mean, that's nothing in my vocabulary. And it turns out to be the richest things I've ever created. And that's an incredibly lovely surprise. Really, really amazingly satisfying and wonderful and fulfilling. And I feel like more and more audiences are being reached by it. And like I said, for me, these are acts of love. So the idea that I can move more and more people with the music I've written, it just makes me happy, even when they cry. Even if it's a sad piece, that I've moved them, and that these pieces have meant something to them in their lives, I think is, especially in this day and age when everything is, upside down, and everything is turbulent, and everything feels uncertain, and everything feels like it's shifting, from under your feet, to have something that speaks to people and gives them joy and satisfaction and love is just very meaningful to me. Really is.
Yeah. Wow. In that sense, really, from the bottom of my heart, congratulations.
Oh,
And
thank you. You're very sweet.
yeah, it
I mean,
is.
it's been in part because I think I wrote these good pieces of music, but in part because I've worked with these magnificent collaborators. The first and foremost being Donna Weng Friedman, but the others as well. Curtis Stewart have lent his hand, and Krystal Joy Brown. So Helen Cha-Pyo. I mean, it's been a real team effort at every level of the way, and that's the other thing that I was not brought up to appreciate, I think, sufficiently: the power and need for collaboration. Right? So I was brought up, again, with good reason, to be a composer in my own right. That means taking charge of your musical materials, taking charge of the conceptual space. And that's all fine, but it downplayed the importance of having collaborators, people with whom you work, who give you new ideas, who support you, who ask you, oh, well, I like it going in this direction, but what if it went slightly in that direction? What would that feel like? And suddenly, you know, they give you an idea that you didn't actually have on your own, and that opens up new vistas. So I'm very big now on the importance of telling younger people, don't forget how important collaboration is. Maintain your own vision and be your own person. And goodness knows, as a female composer, you really have to stand your ground and be your own person and have your own vision. But that does not mean that you underplay the importance of having collaborators and being open to collaborative ideas and collaborative practices.
And so for, I mean, I'm going to talk more about this album, but for our listeners, if they, I would like for my listeners to listen to all 19 pieces. So can they listen to them on like streaming services?
Yes, no, the album has been released. It was officially launched on July 25th, and it's available on all the usual, you know, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, all the, you know, all the normal streaming services. And if you go to Navona Records is the imprint, Parma is the record company that has Navona as its imprint. And if you go to either of those websites and type in, you know, Microvids or my name, it will pop up, and then it takes you directly to the streaming links. So it should be readily available.
Sure. Yes. And
of course, I'm the last one to listen to them because I've had so much Microvids in my brain that I haven't actually listened to the piece since July 25th, since it was released. Because anyway, but yes, it is available there. Yeah.
And then I also listened to purely piano version too. Right?
Yes.
So yeah, that's cool. And then is the score available for?
Yes, I self-publish, but if anybody wants the score, I'm happy to. You know, I do respond, and I can be reached easily at my email address. So it's dekenessey@gmail. Very simple, no space, just dekenessey@gmail.
Gmail.com, and then
yes, and then I will respond to you, and I self-publish, but I send out very nice looking scores. It's got a nice cover and everything. It looks very professional, and I think I've caught all the wrong notes, so it's pretty clean.
Wonderful. Wow. And so I know you may have already mentioned, but what do you hope listeners would feel after hearing Microvids?
So I mean, I hope that they would feel a sense of joy, a sense of how it's possible to have a full range of emotions that go from despair to utter joy and still be a functioning human being, right? So one of the things for me in this piece is that it does have moments that are really, really bitter and empty and forlorn, but the piece doesn't reside there. It doesn't just live there. It also has moments that are joyous. One of them is called pure joy. So for me, the real trick is just to be able to negotiate that terrain. So to enable people to both feel that, yes, life is incredibly hard and it's incredibly sad. And frankly, we all die at the end, right? So it really is sad. On the other hand, as we go through life, we also experience enormous satisfaction and joy from music and friends and whatever it is, right? So to both acknowledge both, so not to be Pollyanna-ish about the joy, about the beauty. It's not just beautiful, satisfying music, but also to offer something more than just despair and emptiness, right? So to bridge that gap between the two, I hope gives people a sense of it being authentic and yet satisfying, so in that sense, feel loved, but in a genuine way, not just in a saccharine, oversweet way. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense.
In terms of the album, is just, to try and get it as many places as possible and to try and get as many people to really enjoy it as possible.
Especially orchestra version, it would be nice to have music teachers, educators to purchase the score and then being able to perform that piece.
It would be a
Youth
lot of
symphony,
fun.
right?
And
Mhm.
again, I believe I'm not an expert on this, and Donna could probably speak more eloquently to this, but I believe that both piano teachers and youth orchestras do not have that many materials of this sort. Materials that are so classical in one sense, but completely contemporary in another sense, right? Because the sonorities are not just, Mozartian or anything like that. And with poems that are really about emotions and emotional vulnerabilities and joys rather than, say, animals, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it doesn't, so these are skewed towards younger audiences, but not, it doesn't, it's not childish stuff.
Mhm.
The
No, no,
themes
no.
are not childish. The music is not childish. I mean, I hope it has the freshness of youth, but that's very, very different. And if you think about the repertoire that's available, say for youth orchestras, there's the Britain, there's Peter and the Wolf. There are a couple of pieces, but not that many. It's not an infinitely large repertoire. So to get it into that repertoire would be a lot of fun. Donna keeps saying that this is the next Carnival of the Animals, only it's not about animals, it's about emotions. Emotions that came out during COVID. I mean, how can you be more relevant than that? Right. And that again, some younger listeners or players can relate to that, but goodness only knows teenagers can really relate to that. Um, and in general, I get the feeling, and again, I'm not the expert, but I get the feeling that when we talk about music for children, we tend to skew to the younger ages. So there's music for people, college age and in their 20s and 30s, young adults. And there's music for repertoire for young children, but not that much that really addresses tweens, as they're called, I believe, or, teenagers. And I think these pieces are firmly in that camp. So I would be delighted if either piano teachers or, youth orchestras had access to this. And I think their students would really, really enjoy them, precisely because they hit that sweet spot between purely professional, requirements, which, teenagers don't quite have yet, and truly beginning students who are, at the age of 5 or 6 can only manage so much technically and emotionally. So I think that would be one of my wishes, to get these versions out into those kinds of places.
If you are enjoying this conversation so far and you're inspired by Stefania's journey in creating Microvids, I encourage you to check out the album. It brings together all three versions, the violin and piano collaboration with Curtis Stewart, the English narration by Broadway star Krystal Joy Brown with pianist Donna Weng Friedman, and the Spanish narration with piano and the New Jersey Youth Symphony under Helen Cha-Pyo. You can also experience the award-winning films born from this project, including Silent Cry, now available on YouTube. Let's talk about your maybe artistic approach. And I've listened to your chorale music, some excerpts of opera that was available on YouTube, and then dance and film scores. So your music strikes me as melodic, feminine, and feminine as in, I'm not saying girly, but feminine, strong female, quality. And then also folk music, I hear at times, and daring and experimental too, because I've listened to this one, several dance music. I don't remember the title, but because you collaborate with this dance company, it was electronic music. Yeah. So, but yet I feel like always find a way to your essence of your style, which is tonal, contemporary, but approachable because it's tonal and melodic. So maybe what makes your approach, or what makes your style, in your opinion, unique, stand out from others?
Oh, that's a difficult question. Talking about your own self is always
yeah, I know.
is
Sorry.
horrendously difficult. It's like describing what you look like, I'm only 5'3". I never think of myself as small. Right. And I know that's not truthful. So getting back to my music, I had an education in Eastern Europe at a music school founded by Zoltán Kodály. So I was brought up on a lot of Bartók, and by American standards, on relatively dissonant contemporary stuff. A lot of Kabalevsky, a lot of Bartók. I don't even remember the other ones. So for me, sort of crunchy, dissonant music never had the same appeal of novelty that it did for a lot of my peers who, at age 18 would discover Stravinsky and they were like, oh my God, those dissonances are so much fun, right? So I tend to write music that's frankly a lot more consonant than most of my peers. And in part also because of my upbringing, I also have always skewed towards music that has folk elements. Those were heavily emphasized in this school founded by Zoltán Kodály. We had a lot of Bartók folk songs, and my heritage is half Hungarian, half Bulgarian, which is neither here nor there for the purposes of Microvids, except that Hungarian music and Bulgarian music are both rhythmically and tonally a little different from Western European musics. So specifically, Hungarian music tends to be modal. It has, flat sevens, and it tends to be what we can call Dorian or Mixolydian, et cetera, et cetera. And Bulgarian rhythms also tend to have a lot of, 3-3-2 or 2-2-3 or, regular patterns, but of irregular underlying beats, which I also sometimes use. So my heritage, in some sense, was filled with both very classical music, because that's what I grew up on, but also infused with folk music. So you're very right to pick up on that. And that has always been part of what I've tried to do. And frankly, one of the things that I realized as a composer is, if you think about the development of music, even in Western Europe, it goes from modal scales to tonality, which is just a reduction of those scales to only two, major and minor. And then it becomes more and more chromatic and dissolves into 12-tone music. But one of the things that I thought would be interesting is to have it move back to a kind of modality that we haven't had since the Middle Ages or since the Renaissance. And that is the modality that is familiar to me from my childhood, from my Hungarian and Bulgarian roots. It also is the modality that is at the root of American contemporary music and pop musics. All blues and blues-derived rock and roll idioms, for instance, are modal, the exact same way that medieval music and Hungarian and Bulgarian music tend to be. So there are a lot of sort of influences that kind of converge in the contemporary moment, or that I try to use as a converging point in my own music. And I hope that that's enough to make it fresh and different, so that my music doesn't actually sound like Brahms or Mozart, and it doesn't emulate them, except insofar as they have very clear structures and clear melodies and music that is fun and understandable on a first listening, but then invites return and return and return. You want to hear it again, both because it's fun and because there's something about it that's new each time. So, and that's not so easy to do, actually. They're tough competitors. Sometimes I hate those guys. I have total professional jealousy when it comes to those men.
Right. Oh, we can talk more about that later,
Mhm.
but wow. But also, I feel like what sets you apart is there's always like clear intention, or maybe, I don't know, you intend it that way or not, but message behind your music, whether that is about feminist or, you
Mhm.
know, climate or political
Mhm.
message. Is it?
I mean, I would say in the last 10 years, that's certainly been the case. It was probably
Mm.
not so very early on in my career when I was just writing like a string quartet or a clarinet quintet or whatever. But yes, it's become more and more important to me to have some, not explicit meaning behind the music, but some larger purpose for it, you know. And goodness knows we have so many issues besetting us that to try and address those in ways that are not ideological and not simple-minded. You don't want to be jingoistic or do something that is so obvious that there's no mystery to it or no illumination at the end of the day. So, but I have written, numbers of pieces that are feminist in nature, meaning that, they call for the possible equality of women. They call for the treatment of women in better ways. And those are, goals that we have to keep setting for ourselves, because they are far from having been met. I've seen some progress in my lifetime, in fact, quite a lot, and I'm very grateful for that. But it's important to keep going, And back in the 90s, I founded the International Alliance for Women in Music, whose goal was to unite the then three composer groups that existed for female composers, and both to unite them, to give a stronger voice, because we're always stronger together than apart, and to also invite other performers and even men, if they like, to come and support. So it's the International Alliance for Women in Music, not just of women in music, right? So whoever wants. So that has always been important to me, like I said, because I've labored in a field that has been 99.9% male, all my life. And in part because of the world around me, because it's far, far from doing justice to women and women's work and women's genius. And perhaps not coincidentally, I'm the composer, or I have been the composer in residence for three groups: one a dance company, one a chamber ensemble, and one a choral chorus, all of which are all female. And that's been great. It's really pleased me that they asked me to be. So I'm composer in residence for the Dal Sogno ensemble, which is a sextet of 6 chamber musicians. I'm composer in residence for Ariel, Rivka Dance, which is an all-female dance company led by a female choreographer, Ariel Grossman. And I'm composer in residence for the Accord Treble Choir, which is an all-female treble choir led by Liz Geisewhite, who's their director. So it's been very, very sort of pleasing for me to do that work, and to work with companies that are excellent, not because they're all female, but because they're really excellent. Right?
Yeah.
So it's been a lot of fun. It's been very, very pleasing at very sort of an emotional level, very, very gratifying for me.
I know you said 99% in the class was, or in your field was male, and you are one of the very few in the group, a female as a composer, right? Has any of that changed?
Yes, I think it's slowly changed, but far more slowly than one might wish. Right? So yes, there are more women represented in conservatories and in music programs than before. And there are more women being programmed, say, in orchestral settings than before. But there is nothing like the 50% parity that one imagines should be the norm. Nothing even close to that. So I don't have my finger on the pulse of contemporary society well enough to be able to tell you why not. But certainly, if things were egalitarian, there's nothing about composing music that takes physical brawn, and you don't have to be 6'2" and 250 pounds of muscle to write music. So there should be just as many women doing it as men, right? There should be no limitation. And yet it's nothing like 50-50. So I just think we have a ways to go. In general, I would say society and classical music circles still tend to not allow or encourage women to be in positions of power, in positions of authority. So it is much, much more difficult for a woman to become a conductor, for instance, than to play in the orchestra, because the conductor tells the orchestra how to play. They're the boss. They tell you what to do. I'm being very, very graphic and very dirty about this. And the same thing is true for a composer. The composer tells the conductor what to do, and the conductor then tells the orchestra, right? So the closer you are, I think, to what I would call position of authority, or being the boss, the less likely it is to be accepted if you're a woman doing that.
Because still
Because
people don't want female to tell others what to do.
Yes,
So what is,
I think it's just that simple. I mean, again, I'm not speaking as a sociologist. I'm not an anthropologist. So this is just kind of conjectural stuff on my part as a composer. But I do think there is still quite a bit of resistance, sort of psychologically, if nothing else, to having women be, having been them be the CEO, as it were, of a company, of an orchestra, of a compositional setting, right? There is still resistance to that. And it's crumbling slowly but surely, but there's also reactions against it now. You can see the political sphere. So yes, it's always, a couple of steps ahead and then maybe a couple of steps back. And you hope that there are more steps ahead than steps back. But there's a lot of work to be done. There really is a lot of work to be done.
What can we do? I know you've created this International Alliance for Women, like as you mentioned, New York Women Composers. You were the board, and
I mean, I don't have an answer to that because there's so much work to be done that I don't have like a grand or master plan. And honestly, I like to spend my time writing music rather than thinking about these things. But my philosophy also is everybody does just a little thing. If we can all move forward just 1 inch, if you move for 1 inch and I do an inch and my friend does an inch, eventually there is real progress. So I content myself with thinking that so long as we all keep doing something, however little, it will add up in the end. And I think there's some truth to that. It's slow, but I think progress is slow if you think about it. The Enlightenment is the 18th century, and it's not until the 20th century that women are allowed to vote. Right? You would think that progression might have taken like 2 years, not 200. Right? So I think we have to acknowledge that progress in all sorts of spheres of life is just a whole lot slower than we'd like to imagine. We're not quite as brilliant creatures as we think we are. But we have to keep going. We have to keep going. We have to keep going. And even if, like I said, you only progress 1 inch, you've done an inch. And you will take another inch or another 2, and then Donna will take another. You know what I mean? It's just, I think it's a collaborative and cumulative effort to move forward. And so I don't despair. I don't know if I'm an optimist, but I'm realistic. I actually think that things do get better over time. They just happen much, much more slowly and much more effortfully than we'd like to imagine.
Yeah. Right. So
sorry, I didn't mean to make you sigh like that.
No. But at the same time, I am encouraged too, like as a female, artist, and I'm not the only one who struggles, or, as a female artist, I think us have to stick together.
Yes.
And support each other
and help each other and be realistic about the limitations and figure out a way to overcome them. And work at overcoming them and work at overcoming them together.
Leading the miracle, always the same. Read of the face, tears, the immaculate. Leading the miracle, always the same. Read of the face, tears, the immaculate. Leading the miracle, always the same. Read of the face, tears, the immaculate. Leading the miracle, always the same. Read of the face, tears, the immaculate.
You're such also a wonderful teacher. I'm learning a lot. And so in July, while I was at your beautiful home, and it was. I met one of your former students while you were teaching at the new school. You were a composition teacher, and I don't know if she learned composition or not, but
I think I don't remember what classes she took. She was one of my first students. And I don't remember what class I taught, but I actually always try to combine courses or to create courses that combine different kinds of subdisciplines in music. Because if composition class just means having your students bring you sketches and then critiquing them, I just don't find that that's very helpful or very interesting. Once or twice, of course, one does that. But I also believe that in order to become a composer, you have to teach them ideas and techniques. And the techniques come from emulating other composers, because that's the way you learn your craft, so to
right, right.
speak. And honestly, I can't teach anybody how to be a composer in some real sense, because I cannot teach you how to be you. Right? That's your own soul, your own abilities, your own vision, your own whatever. And I can't, I'm me and you're you, and I don't see how I teach you to be you. What I can do is I can teach you how to write a Bach fugue or a medieval motet or a Chopin nocturne, right? Because that brings to the foreground set of skills that can be adjudicated, and it either does sound like Chopin or doesn't sound like Chopin. And if it doesn't, figure out why not. What is it that you're doing wrong, right? So I've always tried to give courses where I teach a lot of repertoire in analytic terms. And analytic terms, not in ways that make theoretical mincemeat out of the pieces. I don't care for theory for its own sake, but that illuminate what makes that Chopin nocturne so beautiful, what makes that particular turn to that particular tonality so amazing, right? So that you can sort of steal and copy, right?
Sure.
And the other part of teaching composition is kind of an aesthetic sensibility, so you have some intellectual sense of what is it in Machaut's world that is beauty in music in the 14th century. How would you define the beautiful in the 14th century versus how would you define the beautiful for Bach or the beautiful for Dvorak, right? And the answers are quite different. And if you start to think about those, then you again think, I believe, in compositionally really interesting terms. So most of the courses that I've taught, I try to bridge the gap between what I would call music history, music theory, composition, and aesthetics or intellectual history. So, and one of the great virtues of having been at the New School, and I'm very grateful to the institution for this, they allowed me my entire career to design my own courses. So I was never given a textbook and told what to teach and how to teach it, which it was a great, great freedom. Now there's also a burden because you have to think of these things, But I've taught courses on opera. I've taught courses on Mozart, Beethoven, and Brahms. I've taught courses, that are, the human voice through the ages, for instance. That was one of my favorite ones, where you look at what is it that the human voice does, both in terms of vocal technique, but also in terms of approach to text and subject matter, from Gregorian chant to Milton Babbitt, my own teacher at Princeton, right? So it would, so the courses have always been a hybrid. Technically they're composition classes, but not just, or not really, or not the way that they are typically taught in either conservatories or typical music majors. And that was a lot of fun and kept it interesting. And it also meant that I never had to repeat the same course twice. So even if the course had the same title, I could, inside the class, choose different pieces to demonstrate different ideas or different developments historically or aesthetically or compositionally. So that was a lot of fun. It kept me on my toes and it enabled me to keep learning myself. It kept it alive.
Oh, wow. That sounds so fascinating. I wish I were, I don't know, a composition student and learn from you being.
You're
Yeah,
very
that
sweet.
sounds so fun. So you mentioned about your teacher, Mr. Babbitt, Milton Babbitt, right?
Yes,
And
correct.
he's a very famous composer. And I've interviewed a few composers throughout 5-6 years of this podcast, and then there were several who studied with him. So he seems like a really influential and big, huge figure in the composition
He was.
world.
I mean, he was. He was a short man, but he was really a giant in his field. He really was. And he was one of the most brilliant intellectuals and speakers that I've ever met. I mean, I've met a lot of smart cookies in my life, and Milton was really, really, really smart. So it was just a privilege to be in a room with him and to have conversations with him. Although aesthetically, our approaches couldn't have been more different from the get-go. And one of the great things about Milton was that he never, among all my teachers, he never, ever, not even once, asked me to set aside what I was doing, which even back then was writing tonal pieces, and write something along the lines of what he writes or was writing, which was 12-tone music. And he never asked me that. He always took my pieces when I went in for my composition lessons on their own terms. We'd sit down with, say, a piano trio, and he'd look at the development section. And he'd say, so the transition from the first, section, the main theme, to the second theme, do you think that transition is too long or too, is it too short, or does it go through too many keys or too few keys? In other words, he worked on the material on its own terms. And that was really, really wonderful. And very few, in my experience at least, relatively few composition teachers would do that, because most of them do by example. They teach by example. This is what I do. This is how I do it. Why don't you, young person, try and do it? And then I can tell you if you do it well or not well. And Milton didn't do that to me, because I was not interested ever in writing 12-tone music. And he knew that from the time I went for my interview, for the PhD program. So
I know we talked about your teacher and you being an educator. So what qualities do you think this modern musicians and composers should or must have besides musical skills?
Oh my goodness, what qualities? Well,
or skills.
I mean, life skills. I think for me, there are two aspects to it. One, you need to have a really good sense of craft. And I think I'm going to generalize, so forgive me for doing that. But I think the younger generation is getting a lot of craft in techniques that are contemporary, that have to do with electronic music, with sampling, and et cetera, et cetera. But I think they're getting very little grounding in what I would call time-honored or older Western European techniques. And I think that's a loss. And I don't think they're getting enough of that. I think they need more harmony and counterpoint and all that seemingly dry sounding, old-fashioned stuff. But I think if you can have that under your belt, it will really do you in good stead in the long term. So I think they need craft. The other thing that I think, and I think this has been always true of composers, contemporary and the older generation like me, is they need to have a sense of context. So to be a composer, of course, you need the tools with which to say something. You need the craft, the techniques. But you also have to have something to say. And if you haven't read novels, and if you haven't traveled, or if you haven't studied math or Chinese, I don't even care what. But if there's no bigger context there, then I don't see how you have anything to say. And if the only thing you have to say is this chord moving to that chord, or this sample, being torn apart into those samples, then I'm just not sure what the point is, right? So for me, what I would argue is to have a general education, a real education and a real sense of intellectual curiosity about the world. And not just the contemporary world, but the ancient world, because the ancient world has a lot to teach us also. And it has full of surprises and full of innovations that, get sidelined or get forgotten about. So I would say both more technique, but also more general education. And I wouldn't want to prescribe to anyone what that means, but, everybody should take their own path. But if you're if you're interested in China, learn Chinese and go there and do Chinese history and go on some excavations, you know, right? So do right? So I can imagine all sorts of ways in which you have what I would call a fertile imaginative context, which then gets expressed in music, and then you of course need the skill set with which to, make that happen. But the skill set I think is easier to conquer than this sense of general curiosity and a general ability to understand the world, which is increasingly complicated and increasingly difficult to scope out. But if you want to have something to say to people, you need to have an understanding of the world. I don't claim to have any, synoptic, overarching understanding, but something that you can give that other people don't quite see yet, that you can translate into music.
And life experience too.
And life experience also,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
absolutely. All of those things, yeah.
So now, what's next for you?
Well, the very next thing is August 30th. Donna Weng Friedman and the Dalsonia Ensemble is going to perform another version of Microvids.
Yes, it just keeps evolving. That's great.
And this is for piano sextet, and it's going to be the opening concert at Barge Music of their Here and Now Labor Day weekend festival. And I'm very much looking forward to that, in part because they're brilliant musicians, and this is yet another iteration of Microvids. So I just want to see how it works. And in part because barge music is no longer on a barge itself, so I will no longer get seasick when I go.
Oh, really?
Yes, yeah, they've moved onto land, so it's very close to the original barge, but it's on land. And the last couple of times I went, I get seasick really, really easily. So this sounds very, very silly, but I'm very happy that it's going to be in a regular house, or it's in the boathouse, very close to the original venue.
Barge music used to be like literally it was a boat on the boat or in the boat. So I remember going there to my colleagues' concerts or whatever, and then all of a sudden the background is moving. So yes.
And the first time I went there a couple of years ago, I heard Donna perform something. I don't even remember what, but I went up to her to try and congratulate her afterwards. And she said, "You look green." And that's how I felt, very green.
Yeah, it was a beautiful concept and beautiful venue. But
yeah, it is. But when the waves come in crashing on the boat, it can be. Anyway, so that's the next thing, actually, August 30th. So if people are interested, if you Google barge music, it's there, 2:00.
Yeah, I'll be there. And so what do you hope your artistic legacy to be?
I mean, I would just like to think that my music points a way forward for people, because what I've tried to do is reach back to the past, which I think was abandoned during the course of the 20th century. With atonality and 12-tone music, a lot of what I find the most beautiful and compelling about the Western musical tradition was just kind of thrown out the window, deliberately and purposefully, not because it was forgotten, but because people were against it. And I've reached back to that, but I've tried to reach back to some of it without just duplicating the past. My metaphor for that is I don't want to be put back in a corset. That's the last thing I want, right? So I don't want to return to the past. But there are things about the past that I find compelling, its sense of beauty, its sense of melody and rhythmic clarity, all of those things that I think can and should be preserved. But I've tried to bring those forward into the present day using means that are more contemporary. So I'm kind of hoping that I can bridge the gap between a more distant past and a future that speaks to generations to come. I mean, that's a big goal, and I have no idea, honestly. No one can see their position in sort of music history in a compelling or safe way, but that's kind of what I've tried to do, certainly.
So what you provided us today is a masterclass, and So I really appreciate you for
you're
being
very
here
sweet.
and sharing your expertise. And once again, congratulations on so many successes, but especially for Microvids.
Oh, thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful work. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for
So,
having me. This has been so much fun.
oh,
The time has passed like it took 3 minutes, it feels like.
oh yeah, same. I feel the same way.
Yeah.
So for our listeners, please go to stefaniadekenessey.com to learn more about her work and start listening to her latest and delightful album, Microvids. Before I let you go, we have one more thing to do. It's the rapid fire questions. Now, we take this segment very seriously. You've shared stories and expertise today, but these next questions, carefully curated by our team, which is me, will give our listeners a glimpse into who you truly are. So let's do this. I want you to answer each question with the shortest response possible. No explanation is necessary.
Okay.
So, level 1. What is your comfort food?
I don't have one.
Oh, okay. How do you like your coffee in the morning?
With a little milk.
Cats or dogs?
Cats, definitely.
Yeah, I've met your cat. Sunrise or sunset?
Sunset. I hate mornings.
Summer or winter?
Summer.
Level 2. What skill have you always wanted to learn but haven't had a chance to?
Drawing.
Good one. What is your word or words to live by?
My word or words to live by?
Yeah.
Kindness.
What is the most important quality you look for in other people?
Kindness.
Name a composer you wish more people knew about.
Monteverdi.
Now, level 3. Name one piece in your current playlist.
I don't listen to music.
Oh,
I write music.
oh yes. So, yeah, that's right. And then you mentioned that your music is always in your head. Yeah. So, silence is the best. All right. Fill in the blank. Music is blank.
My life.
Beautiful. Ding, ding. That's it. So, Stefania, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your artistry and journey and innovative spirit with such openness and creativity and connection. So, for our audience, if you'd like to explore more of Stefania's extensive work, please visit stefaniadekenessey.com and subscribe to her YouTube channel at De Kenessey. And Instagram, follow her on Instagram at De Kenessey as well. Of course, I encourage you to start listening to her latest album, Microvids, on any streaming services. All links will be in the show notes. And of course, a huge thank you to all of you, our faithful fans and listeners, for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give a thumbs up and subscribe to the Piano Pod on YouTube. Share and review this episode on your favorite social media platform and tag the Piano Pod. It's one of the best ways to help our community grow, and we love hearing your feedback. For the latest updates, guest news, stories, spark creativity and connection, follow the Piano Pod on Substack, TikTok, and LinkedIn. I will see you in the next episode of the Piano Pod. Thank you again, Stefania.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been pure joy. It really has. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.